What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hartnett, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I am on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Florencia Ortelli, and we speak about her learnings from architecture, about facilitation, and how she pivoted. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. Now, enjoy. Hello, Flor.
Hello, Miriam. How are you?
Welcome to the show. I'm good.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, me too. And building bridges.
Yeah, for sure. Huge bridges in this occasion.
Exactly. Mental one and metaphorical ones.
For sure.
And to start, I love the question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
I know you love that question, and I got an answer for that. I have been thinking a lot since you asked me that. So let me think. I don't think there was a specific moment where I decided to call myself a facilitator, but I had experienced many times a situation where I had to explain a lot about being an architect, why I was running workshops instead of designing spaces and drawing blueprints, because that is what is expected from architects, right? Starting to call myself a facilitator actually made it easier to people to understand what I was doing. So that's what I decided to call myself that way. But I don't remember any specific moment where I started to do so.
That's fascinating. So basically, if I understand correctly, it was for you the label that would describe your way of working.
For sure. Yeah, that's it.
And
you sum it up better than me.
Yeah, very interesting. And what made you choose this route instead of doing what other architects do?
That is, I would say, a long story. I will sum it up for you because I discovered these innovation frameworks and I got fascinated with it. If you want me, I can tell you how I started with it.
Yes, please.
I was studying architecture in a university from my country in Argentina, and I had the opportunity to participate in a scholarship in Spain. And there was a teacher who introduced us to participatory design, where the final user was involved in the entire design process and into the concept of empathy and the deeply understanding of needs. And I got fascinated with all these new concepts, and I needed to learn more about it. So when I come back to Argentina, I got a job as a workplace designer. When your job is to create the place where people go to work, you need to analyze everything about them, how they interact, how they do what they do, how they run meetings, and discover everything about their interactions. So by getting in touch with how other people work, I discovered these frameworks such as design thinking, agility, and other innovation frameworks. And specifically, when I was studying design thinking, I was fascinated about the ideation phase. I was all about ideation methods and practicing every time I had the chance. But I was still working as a designer. And at the company I was working by that time, there was no sign of facilitators at all. So I started to create my own spaces for practicing facilitation in informal meetings with my friends. And then I got some opportunities in universities. But none of my colleagues actually understood what I was doing. I encountered many people asking if you're an architect, why are you helping people to have great ideas? So suddenly there was a huge gap between what I was doing and what I wanted to do. And that's where I realized I had to create the need of facilitators in companies. And I jumped into freelancing. And I remember a creativity book I read written by an Argentinian writer. And I discovered that he had a creativity lab here where he runs workshops, and decided to get in touch with him. So together, he, as an expert in creativity development, and I, focused on methodologies, started to facilitate workshops together. And at the beginning, it was mostly focused on ideation, but we jumped into team building, and it's all about exploration and communication and development and so on. So that is, in a nutshell, how I pivot from architecture to facilitation.
It's fascinating how you got hooked by just the method and then absorbed to an extent that you would kind of change sides.
Yeah, but if all these methodologies were so new and so interesting for me that I needed to find a way to apply them. And maybe it was not architecture the right way, or where it was mostly needed. So I tried to find these spaces where I can be part in. Sorry.
Yeah. And you mentioned the design of workspaces and how important this participatory process is for this. So what is it that you have learned from architecture and your work as an architect and designer of spaces, basically, for your facilitation work?
Well, I think that practicing architecture is all about facilitation without even realizing it. You know? All architects and designers in general are facilitators in these roles, and they already, because they are the bridges that allow people to meet their goals and needs through design. So being a designer is all about active listening, it's about communication, understanding, and empathy. And I think in this role, we learn to be facilitators without even knowing it. So in other words, being a designer is like a never-ending facilitation practice.
So the facilitation of making it easy to implement an idea, is this what you mean? Or to come up with an idea and to find its way into manifestation?
I think designers work that way because they have the tools to take these ideas and make it real, in their own way. In case of architects, they come up with the spaces, but every designer has their own feel. So I think that all designers have the tools already to facilitate whenever they want.
What is it that you had to unlearn, maybe?
Unlearn? I would say that architects might be a little in love with the idea of controlling several things about their design, and sometimes you try to control everything in a facilitation, and that was something I needed to unlearn from the first moment I started to facilitate, for sure. Yeah, you have to lose control. Let the people control the topic and the discussion.
Which is a very interesting point, because I love to work with designers and with creative people. And still I can see this friction, because designers have they're great designers because they have the eye for what works and what doesn't. And then if you bring too many wild ideas in,
they don't like it.
There's always this kind of tendency of, no.
What are you doing with my design?
Can do this.
Yeah, that happens. That's true. We designers are like a little bit sensitive and protective of our ideas. And facilitation is about the opposite. It's about building all together. So that's an interesting point, and I have to be honest, I needed to unlearn it for sure.
Yes, and I would be very curious if you have some best practices or a little anecdote that helped you to unlearn that. And just to defend the designers before going there, I think I see designers as artists, and working on a design and presenting it is already very vulnerable, and they put art, craft, and expertise in it. And then to see a group of self-spoken creatives to rip it apart, I can imagine that it's a difficult process for a designer to let go this control.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So what was your strategy or tactic?
Honestly, I read a lot about it, about the idea of letting the team flow, the communication flow and the ideas flow. And at the beginning, I was like, I was trying to control the meeting, trying to be really attached to the agenda and the times, and controlling the time, And I realized that I was cutting people from inspiration, They started to talk about something, and I was like, the clock is running and we have to move on like that. And it doesn't work that way, You have to be able to pay attention to the insights and how the communication flows, and give the people the time they need to actually come up with the ideas and get aligned, in the concepts. So it was, I would say, like trying and error until I think I got it right. You need the practice of active listening a lot to do so.
Yeah, to also sense the moment. When are they still discussing and finding alignment and crafting the idea? And when does it become just chatter? Diluting the idea.
Yeah, you have to pay a lot of attention to that in order to also make the best of the time they have together. So it was a practice, I have to admit it.
Yeah. And to come back also to the spaces, to the workspaces. And well, now since the pandemic, lots of things have changed. And that's another topic that we might go then afterwards. But there was this hype of having a creative room for teams to come together to collaborate better. And there was the idea of having these kicker tables. So to create the workspace in a way that will invite collaboration. So basically that the space facilitates collaboration. From your perspective as the designer of the space previously and now a facilitator of collaboration and creativity, how do these two concepts work together? Do we need these spaces to facilitate?
Okay, I designed many workplaces where ideation rooms were a must, because every client wanted to see these walls cover full height of sticky notes everywhere, and the whiteboards full of diagrams. And I think it was because it feels like a demonstration of innovation and creative work. But it was believed that to generate a healthy environment for collaboration, people needed to be in the same room with several resources to generate powerful ideas. But the thing is that with pandemic, this belief was teared apart. The thing is that with pandemic, suddenly this collaboration needed to keep on happening without even being all together. So I would say that one of the things lockdowns have taught us about collaboration is that it's not about the room or the space. It is about the attitude that everyone in the team brings to the ideation moment. So it's about engagement and communication and there to share without the fear of failing or the humility to keep on learning from other people. So to answer your question, although most of us really enjoy this room, let's admit it, they are probably a bit overrated.
Yeah, what I hear is that the idea of having this creative room is more attractive than the reality of really using it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of,
yeah, for sure.
I'm guilty of that too. I would order a lot of books, believing that just by ordering them, I can kind of magically put the content in my brain.
Everyone wants that.
Right? And I can imagine that many companies that they think, or they have this belief by just having this dedicated room for creativity, it will spark creativity automatically.
No, there is no magic button with that. It doesn't matter if you are or are not in an ideation room. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And speaking about ideation, which is your big flagship, what makes an ideation process work?
I would say that when everyone in the meeting feels comfortable enough to share silly ideas, like the ones you know they won't work, despite of the people surrounding you, I think that's key for an ideation to work, because that's where you know that the people are relaxed and they're going in the right path, because they allow themselves to fail in front of others.
And when you say ideas that won't work, does it mean, are you searching for ideas that don't work? Or is it just this, okay, let's try to find as many ideas and get totally crazy?
For sure. That is what I mean. Try to expose yourself. When you know something might sound silly, not good enough, not creative enough for other people, and you share it anyway, I think that's where you are able to build, because you are in the path of exploration, I would say.
Do you have a favorite exercise for that?
I have many favorite exercises. And it's hard to pick just one, but I got one. I think it might work. It works very well. And I'm a fan of fun presentations. So at the beginning of the workshop, I try to put everyone in the same ground, And I really enjoy a dynamic called a sticky note confession. When people need to introduce themselves to a group, especially if they're in small groups, I ask them to write down a confession in a sticky note and paste it on their forehead. And when they explain who they are and what they do, they have to share with the team the confession, and it can be a fun fact or a secret fear about themselves, something like that. So to set an example, I am usually the first one in confessing. So I usually share a fun fact about myself, that is that I am a terrible car driver, and I needed to take my driving test 5 times before I got my license. Nobody knows that about me, and nobody would guess it on first sight. So every time I practice this dynamic at the beginning of a workshop, usually everyone has a great laugh, and it helps people to be more relaxed and create a common ground for everyone in the room. I really enjoy it.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah, because it's stuck on your forehead that you're just human.
Yeah. You cannot escape. Yeah. People laugh a lot with this. They share things that nobody in the team can guess. So suddenly you don't know how to ride a bike, or I remember someone was afraid of bottoms. So that's the kind of things it surprises you with this exercise. I really recommend it.
Yeah. And it allows to show vulnerability in everyone at their own level.
Yeah,
which then creates trust again that you need for coming up with crazy ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially when they are in the presence of a boss or a leader, and suddenly the leader says something that is absolutely not expected, they are like, what? I cannot believe this.
Would you invite the leader to go first, so right after you, or would you just leave it to them?
I think it depends on the team. Sometimes the leaders want to be the first ones to break the ice, but sometimes they feel a little bit refused, and that's where I have to ask them to jump into the dynamic.
Yeah. I can imagine that this says a lot about the personality of the leader and their leadership style.
For sure. If you want to have an insight on that right at the beginning of the meeting, this exercise will allow you to catch that, if you want to. Yeah.
How long do they leave the sticky note on their forehead?
Until everyone has spoken. They are all exposed.
I was wondering that if you then go in the next phase where you maybe have a serious conversation and you say confession.
I will bear that in mind. It's a good one.
Nice experiment.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let you know how it goes.
In your experience, what makes a workshop fail?
There are some situations that makes a facilitator struggle during a workshop. For example, when people mistrust the activity, they don't see the value of the workshop, or maybe where is lack of participation, where people are not engaged. This probably, you won't probably arrive to a great outcome. But from my point of view, I would say that many workshops fail when the fight of egos appears. Because when leaders do not want to step aside from their position, or they don't seem to be interested in others' ideas, and it gets hard for teams to actually open up and propose their insights because they feel the pressure of making it right. So there is no room for experimentation in that way.
And it feels like for both it requires confidence from the facilitator. In the first example you gave, it's about the confidence to lead through the structure and process to earn the trust of the group.
For sure.
That it's worth their time to engage in all these games, as perceived by some. And the second also implies courage to, in the worst case, step in or to flatten the room, as you just described through the exercise, to flatten the room and not allow egos to pop up in the first place.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that when you shifted, or when you were still at the borderline between facilitation and working as an architect, I can only imagine that you were confronted with a lot of this resistance and doubt. So the group would sit there. So why do we are all creative people. Why do we now need a creative exercise?
Yeah, that happens when the creative people you're working with do not want to take part into collaboration. And that happens a lot, quite often, actually. I think it has to do with what we talked before, that designers, for example, are really protective of their ideas. Sometimes I don't want to speak like for everyone, but there are sometimes that it's hard to let your ideas transform in the hands of other people. So I have to struggle a lot with that, because when people feel creative enough, suddenly the fight of ego appears. And that's where you, as a facilitator, can create this collaboration ground in order to make ideas owned by the team and not by a person. It's not easy.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, how do you do that? Is it kind of ground rules you define in the beginning, or because it's really to get a group from the I to the we?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not quite sure if it's the right word in English, but I try to set rules at the beginning of the workshop, as you mentioned, where I announce that the ideas are from the team and are built all together. We're not interested in knowing exactly which idea came out of which person, and we are building all together. And that is why I decided, I didn't at the beginning, that was true, but after trial and error, I decided, for example, to use platforms, online platforms, where people share with others and anonymously. So you lose the track of the idea. It evolves, but you cannot point out the origin of the idea. That is something that at the beginning I didn't know, because of mostly, I would say, the culture of the workplace I was working in, and because they wanted to maybe reward the person that came out with that idea. But after many practices, I discovered that the best way is to do it anonymously, at least from my point of view.
Which I think is a very honest way also to deal with it, because as much as we would love to think that our ideas are our own, because I'm standing under the shower and suddenly I had this great idea and it's only mine. Whereas in reality, it's just our brain that processes all the ideas of everyone else.
Yeah.
And suddenly we have the impression that we just gave birth to this idea. But actually, it is always the sum of many.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm pretty sure that when you come up with a new idea, you're probably combining something that already exists. So it's actually not yours at all.
Yeah.
You're just combining, probably.
Which can still make it unique, but then it's less important who put the dots together and who contributed to it, or giving credit to everyone, basically.
Mm-hmm.
A simple deck of cards can be a brilliant way to engage a group. You can use them to stimulate thought, inject energy, or spark lively conversations. But how can you use cards when you're facilitating virtually? Deckhive.com is a brand new platform that enables you to use cards on screen just as you would face-to-face. Invite people to a shared real-time session and then let them select, move and flip cards over. Our growing library includes many popular card decks, including picture cards, strengths cards, emotion cards and more. But if we don't have what you need, you can even create your own deck really easily. Use the code WORKSHOPSWORK when you subscribe to a paid monthly plan and you'll get the first month completely free. Go to deckhive.com and give it a try.
One thing that I personally find still challenging, and I think that's also one of the difficult parts of facilitation, is to go from ideation to narrowing down. Okay, so what is your strategy to select the ideas with which you're going to work further?
I usually implement different divergent techniques. I make people write, draw, combine things from different universes, many inspiration practices in order to have a lot of ideas, as many as I can. And then I ask them to pick the ones that they love from their solo ideation. And then I put together 2-3 people and let them discuss the idea in pairs or in small groups. And they need to align themselves in just one idea. It's like a liberating structure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think they work incredibly well for this idea alignment. Sometimes I do also dot voting, this easier voting techniques. But I really enjoy when they discuss with others and get feedback and create together. So I tend to use this technique a lot.
I love that, because and I have the impression that there's a new trend away from dot voting. Before, everyone was dot voting, and now it's more like, maybe it's also an outcome of the pandemic that our workshops are much shorter. So we have less time to discuss all the ideas and to do all the voting and then to vote again and to discuss again. So we have to be very mindful of the time we're having together.
Mm-hmm.
So if I understand you correctly, they first do an individual brainstorm, and then they select the one idea of their own brainstorm and bring this idea to a group, and then they merge these ideas together.
Yeah.
And then they come back with one idea.
Yeah, that's a way of picking the best you have.
Yeah.
And it also builds a little bit more confidence in your own idea, in your own proposal. So when you need to communicate to others, you feel a little bit better about it. You know, you have something valuable to share. And when everyone shares something that is valuable for themselves, they tend to be more able to create something new together. And I think, as you mentioned, that optimize the time we have in the workshop, for sure.
Yeah. And again, it also highlights what you mentioned before, that an idea is a collective process. So by almost forcing them to not walk out with their own idea, but to merge it, you're getting them into the spirit. Okay, we're not talking about individual ideas. We are talking about collective ideas that have been co-created.
Yeah. And you're aware of that since the beginning of the workshop. So you are more inclined or more open, I would say, to collaborate in this merge idea.
Beautiful. I like the consistency. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've been talking about the creative spaces or the working spaces, physical, that you have designed as an architect, and now facilitating mostly online using virtual tools, which is nice because they keep it anonymous, as you mentioned. What is your opinion on hybrid?
I would say that it might work. I haven't tested yet, but it might work. But I think there is a thing about where is the people located with this hybrid method? Because if you have a facilitator who is not in the room and needs to see what people is doing, they're all end up working online.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure how it is going to work. I didn't have the chance to do it yet, but I would like to try it anyways.
That's actually a good point. So you mean if the facilitator is in the space, does it actually matter whether the facilitator is with the group physically or online? Because if you want to merge all the content together, then you have to be online.
Online, yeah. I think it's hard to imagine a moment where the facilitation or a situation where the facilitator is not in the room, the people are all together, and how the facilitator can actually engage the people. They are already together, It's something that I need to work on. I would really like to try it, but I think it needs to be polished.
Now I get your point, because if the facilitator is not there, and group dynamics is the most important reason why we need a facilitator, right?
Yeah.
So if everyone is individually behind their screen, you can manage this dynamic. But if you have a group suddenly being autark in their own space, it's very difficult to guide and to bring it then together with those who are distributed.
Sure. And despite they all being together, they need to do their work online anyways.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's what I realized. And I participated in one hybrid workshop as a participant or co-host, and I was in the physical space. And I must say that the distraction from just being in the physical space together, and that it's so exciting, it might also be the reason after so many months of lockdown.
For sure.
But it requires an additional mental effort to focus on the screen and the group that is distributed, as well as on the group that is in the space.
Yeah.
That I believe personally there will always be a bias for the physical space. And therefore, I would say either all in the same room physically or all in the same room digitally.
Yeah, because if not, you have two works. You have to attend the people online, and then the physically is not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, why it's important to have also a creative space virtually and in the space you actually are. Try to build your own ideation room surround you.
So if If someone wants to build their own ideation room, what would you put in there?
I would say that there are many things that science suggests to boost creativity. There are some rules, I would say. The important thing is that you get relaxed, calm, and focused on what you are doing. So science actually tell us that you need to follow the patterns of the nature.
Mm-hmm.
For example, have some colors that reminds you of nature in your surroundings. Have some vegetation, a pot with a plant. Maybe be near a window with sunlight and fresh air. This is all important. But when I start workshop, I try to take a minute and ask people to have nearby something that brings them joy. For example, a picture, a memory, a music instrument you play, or maybe if you draw or paint, have your elements around you, because that feeling of joy will help you to relax, to actually have a good mood for the ideation.
Good point. And it also creates this kind of safety in our own space. So if we see something that brings us joy, we feel safe somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure, for sure.
And then our creative mind is easier to open up. Like
For
that.
sure.
Thank you.
No problem. I try to encourage them. Just pick something of your surrounding. Maybe you really enjoy having coffee at the morning at the ideation. Okay, have a cup of coffee with you, if that's okay with you. Something I try to or ask them a lot to leave aside is the cell phone. Please leave your cell phone in another room, because with so many notifications and sounds and stuff, we all are tempted to reach the phone if we have it nearby. So I ask them if they can leave your cell phone in another room for the ideation moment.
Yeah. And seeing all the results, measuring the impact of distraction and multitasking, that how long it actually takes us to get back into the flow and focus of the task we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think even more difficult to get back into a creative task.
For sure.
Into the
that
flow.
Is why
we get distracted by the phone.
It's a temptation. You have it nearby and you need to reach it. And it's a constant distraction. Yeah. So I try to avoid it.
Good one. Jan Keck, a previous guest on the show, he creates sleeping bags, smartphone sleeping bags. So it's basically just an envelope. And he draws a picture on it, like a little bed, and then he puts a cell phone in.
Perfect. That's a good one.
Right? It's a nice one.
For sure.
And I don't want to close this conversation without having asked, because if I remember correctly, you're working on a book.
Yes, I am.
How is this going, and what is it you want to share, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. It's on its final path. I'm arriving to the final publication. I know, or any writer can tell you that when you're in the final path, suddenly it takes a lot of time, more than expected, but it's okay. It's a really long creative work, writing a book. So I'm okay with that. But I'm really, really happy to finally start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, But I'm so happy with it.
So what is maybe you can already create some excitement. So what is the nutshell, or what is the the big learning of your book, the big promise?
I focused it on techniques that allow designers to immerse in design thinking, agility, and communication with certain concepts and elements that doesn't overwhelm you when the time of learning these things happens. So I'm focused on extracting concepts that are really easy to implement for architects when they want to get involved in design thinking, when they want to arrange their work, the way of working with agility concepts, and when the time of sharing ideas comes. You know, there are many things about communication that I think it's important for designers to learn, and I share on them. So I really like to say that it's a book for designers that wants to change the world by listening better.
Beautiful. And just two final questions because I'm curious. One is, what is it about agility that you think is relevant for designers?
There are many things about agility. It's not only the way it helps you, and organize your work, the way you work in small pieces and sprints and stuff, but it's something about I really love about agility that it never takes the eyes away from the users. And that is super valuable. And sometimes I know it from experience that designers tend to listen to themselves and what they want more than what people need. That happens. We try to avoid it, but that happens. And agility have a lot of concepts that can help you attend needs better.
This makes total sense. And maybe not only for designers. And I do see the need, or that it makes sense to address such a book to one audience in order to speak their language.
Yeah.
And to really apply it. So what would be your one communication advice to them then?
To designers, you mean?
Yeah, to the audience of your book. You said there's a big part about communication. What is the one tip?
The one tip I could say, and it's something that really worked for me, step out of your comfort and knowledge zone and step into new industries and new ways of working. Open up your mind to different ways of creating. In architecture, there is certain methodologies that you follow and everyone follows to create. And when you move to other industries, for example, software development or service design, something really different from what we are used to happens. And they are creating and designing too. And that it's where you learn other ways of creating. And I think that's really valuable for designers to be aware of,
Yeah.
Step out of what you know and learn from any other field that will reach you, fill you with insights.
The beginner's mindset.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to invite me into the world of architects and what facilitators can learn from this design lens.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you, Miriam. A lot.
If someone, and I always like to close with that question, if someone fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to the show, what would you like them to walk away with?
It's a difficult question, but I would say have fun in your workshops. Let the team leader the session. You are there for them, and you have more to learn from the teams than what you think you know. So go for it.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.